It's all downhill from here. President Moorhead will also be speaking at my bar mitzvah and my funeral. So that's incredibly gracious. Whenever I think that I hear something kind said about myself and I think, well, yeah, they really have a point there, my mind goes back to a moment, it's been about 8 years ago now, on the Washington Mall. I was at the National Book Festival, and I was on my way at that point to give my talk about Andrew Jackson, and a woman ran up to me, which doesn't happen enough as a basic rule. Happened a lot to Mr. Raber back in the day. Well, more on your legal counsel in a moment. But this woman ran up and said, "Oh my God, it's you." And I said, "Well, yes, you know. Existentially speaking, that's hard to argue with, you know. This may be the only place in Georgia where I can use existential as an adverb." She said, "Will you wait right here? I want you to sign your new book." And I said, "Well, yes, of course." And I was standing there and I was really thinking, I have the world right where I want it. Women are running up to me, they want me to sign books. You know, this is the way it should be. Hand to God, she brought back John Grisham's latest novel. So, whenever I think I have the world right where I want it, I remind myself that somewhere in America there is a woman with a forged copy of The Runaway Jury. So with that in mind, Mr. President, Madam Provost, Councilor Raber, Mr. Stevens, brilliantly done. I'm grateful for your hospitality and for the privilege of sharing this occasion with you. I will say that President Moorhead's invitation is an act of ecumenical grace. I am a Tennessean. I teach at Vanderbilt, and I come from the smallest possible college you can imagine. The University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee, where Mr. Raber and I were alumni. For those of you who may not know Sewanee hugely well, it's best understood as a combination of Downton Abbey and Deliverance. But let's recall that Deliverance was written by a Georgian. So we have that together. I also, and I hesitate to mention this, but I am a historian, so I believe in full disclosure. I grew up on Missionary Ridge, which is how General Sherman got down here to see y'all. So I apologize, but I wasn't there that day. So don't hold that against me. I know well that I am the only thing standing between you all and the rest of your life, so I will be brief. I am a biographer, a historian, and I believe deeply that William Faulkner was right. He was a Mississippian who would have come to Georgia if he could have gotten in. That he was right when he wrote that the past is never dead, it isn't even past. And Bulldogs understand this better than almost anyone. Your university was founded within less than a decade of the Declaration of Independence. Remarkable. You are given your 1785 charter. You are in fact older than the constitutional republic, which is now within hailing distance of its 250th year. So well done. You know history in your own lives, the graduates do. The world has turned over many times since you have been in it. By my count, in the years of your birth, and your parents and special friends, I think, will appreciate this, you came into the world during the Clinton administration. As it turns out, there will only be one. Well, let's see how y'all like a couple of paragraphs from now. This was the first Clinton administration. He was about to run against Bob Dole. I saw Bob Dole last week, Senator Dole. You all remember, war hero, shot in Germany on April 14th, 1945, 2 days after Franklin Roosevelt died. Heroic senator, presidential nominee when you all were about 1 or 2, ran against Clinton. And we were at the President Bush 41's library down in College Station. People who are at Texas A&M couldn't get in here either, so they had to go somewhere. And President Bush, who is 92 years old, was holding a martini. Let's call it his first, but it probably wasn't. And Senator Dole, who's also in a wheelchair, is rolled in, and President Bush says, "Bob, you want a drink?" And Dole said, "Yeah, I'll have a Cosmopolitan." And Bush said, "What's a Cosmopolitan?" And Dole said, "I don't know, but it's got vodka in it." So that's our version of Adams and Jefferson right there. But the years you were born, this is what was going on. The Dow Jones closed between 4,000 and 5,000. A gallon of gas cost $1.15. Television was being ruled by ER, Seinfeld, Friends, Home Improvement, and the Best New Artist Grammy when you all were coming into the world, and I think we should take a quiet moment for this, was Hootie and the Blowfish. So, makes you wonder about the predictive power of awards, doesn't it? Here are some of the movies that came out when you all were coming into the world. Batman Forever, Toy Story, Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, Father of the Bride Part 2, which is kind of scary because that would mean divorce, it seems to me, but anyway. Grumpier Old Men, which is what people used to call me and your lawyer. And my personal favorite, Die Hard with a Vengeance. So this is the popular culture into which you came into the world. On a serious note, when you were children, terror struck us out of a brilliant blue sky on Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. It began the period of the longest sustained warfare in the history of the United States. Your generation has lived in a country at war longer than any other generation, including the Revolutionary War. And that is something, the implications and meaning of which we will be dealing with through all the length of days of your lives. And that will soon become your responsibility. History is not dry or dull. It's the living story of our lives, shaping all that we are and all that we may become. In thinking about the nation's past, present, and future, we do best, I believe, to resist the competing temptations of sentimentality, of flags and trumpets, or the idea of history as Zoloft, and resisting cynicism, the cool cynicism about America, the reluctance to admit that we've gotten things right as well as wrong. I believe that to know how to think about the past in all its seemingly disparate elements and distant events is to be armed against despair. For if the men and women of the past, with all their sins and appetites and ambitions and greed and selfishness, could press on through ignorance and superstition, through racism and sexism, through selfishness and greed, to form a more perfect union, then maybe we can too. And certainly we need you to do that. America was founded amid fear and anxiety. From the Revolutionary War to the battle over the Constitution to the emergence of Jacksonian democracy, from the war for the Union to the struggle to save democratic capitalism in the age of Franklin Roosevelt, from the icy fears of the Cold War to the gloom of the 1970s, the story of the nation has been one of perpetual crisis and provisional consensus, and it always will be. This moment, as uncomfortable as it is for many, as uncertain as it is for many, is not entirely unique. Thomas Jefferson once noted that divisions of opinion have defined free societies since the days of Greece, that other Athens. That's the one without the hedges or the arch or that statue of Uga, which worries me, I must say, because I'm afraid that after the apocalypse comes, whenever that might be, archaeologists of future centuries will dig up UGA and think that we were all a race of dog worshipers. Now, I know you all are, but in Tennessee, we at least want Smokey to be somewhere. So work on that for me. The art of politics lies in the manufacturing of a workable consensus for a given period of time. It's not about total victory. For the point of a republic, the point of the world you are inheriting, is the preservation, not necessarily the resolution, of differences of opinion. Thank you. My mom came. You may be up one day, but down the next. And when you're down, you want and you need the grace of the majority. And when you're in the majority, it's in turn incumbent on you when that wheel turns, and believe me, it always turns, to return that grace with conviction. Democracy is not only about winning the argument, it's also inevitably about the freedom to make the arguments we believe in. So if you're unhappy about politics right now, it might help to know that Americans have been unhappy about politics from the very beginning. I conceive the republic to be in extreme danger, said Patrick Henry in 1788. And if you're thrilled with politics right now, and even believe that the arrival of the kingdom of heaven on earth is at hand through Trump Tower, which is a hell of a vessel to do it. Sorry, Reverend. I'm an Episcopalian, so we do that a lot. There are only 6 of us left, so we have to stick together. God's frozen people, all here for you. If you believe that everything's about to be perfect, that if, for instance, we're about to be great again, I refer you to all of human history from Genesis forward. Things do not always move in a straight line. So let's all keep cool in these heated times. I think a sense of coolness and of proportion will serve us well. So what in our own time can we learn from the past? I think that the perfect should not be the enemy of the good, that compromise is the oxygen of democracy, and that we learn the most from those who came before, not by looking up at them adoringly or down on them condescendingly, but looking them in the eye and taking them for what they were, as human beings, not as gods. Which brings us to the moral utility of history. It is tempting. This is happening on campuses around America. It's happening in the culture. It's tempting to want to feel superior to the past. But when we begin to condemn posterity for slavery, for Native American removal, for denying women their full role in the life of the nation, let us pause and think. What injustices are we perpetuating even now that future generations will look back upon us in shame and wonder? And let's use the outrage about the past, manage it and marshal it, and raise our own awareness, inspire our own action to fix the problems that are all around us. Self-righteousness can be a besetting sin, and it's one worth avoiding. So it's inarguable that today, in our own time, many Americans are fearful and angry about the future. They believe that the institutions that govern our lives, the government, the employers, the media, are arrayed against them. And those voices spoke loudly, perhaps more loudly and unconventionally than ever before this November. We must all hope for the success of our country and that of our president-elect, for his success is now our success too. But let us also remember a fact of history, not an opinion, not a partisan view, but an inescapable fact of American history. Diversity is a virtue, not a vice. Walls are for the weak, not the strong. And we have always grown stronger, the wider we've opened our arms and the more we've opened our hearts. The United States of America in 2016 has the world's largest Air Force. Do you know who has the second largest Air Force? The United States Navy. We're doing just fine. We have absorbed waves of diversity. We have found an American core, an American creed that through storm and strife has served us well. And it is now your obligation as liberally educated people, liberal in the sense of the word free, classically educated people. You've encountered what Matthew Arnold called the best that's been thought and said in the world. This burden of continuing this journey in the right direction now falls to you. Americans are a tough and a good people. Our better angels are likely to prevail. We just have to work to see that they do. So we need to listen to each other more, not just talk to the folks we agree with, but with the folks whose views might drive us crazy. Liberals need to realize that conservatives sometimes have a point. Conservatives need to acknowledge those places where liberals may be onto something. It's a fact of history that nobody, left, right, or center, has a monopoly on truth, no matter what you may read on the internet or hear on cable TV. Democracy is not only about tolerating differences, but celebrating them. And we have to be forgiving, for all of us need forgiveness from time to time. We live in an age of division and of self-absorption. We stare at screens. We filter our news to suit our ideological predispositions. We offer reflexive opinions without much thought and with increasing fervor and speed. And yet our common welfare depends not on what divides us, but what unifies us. St. Augustine once defined a nation as a multitude of rational beings united by the common objects of their love. I want to repeat that. It's the best definition of a nation I've ever heard. A multitude of rational beings united by the common objects of their love. So what do we love in common right now? What does the class of 2016 heading forward love in common? The painful but unavoidable answer is we don't love enough in common. And we must remedy that. And we'll do so, in my view, by consultation with the past. History does have the capacity to bring us together. For the story of the American journey is ultimately the story of obstacles overcome, crises resolved, freedom expanded, and strength enduring. Think of the long story unfolding still. From Lexington and Concord to Lewis and Clark, from Fort Sumter to D-Day, from Seneca Falls to Selma. It's now your hour, and if so, I'd like to offer a bit of counsel. Be curious, be gracious, be hopeful. Love your neighbor, vote in each and every election, sometimes more than once. When George H.W., parenthetically, because I am the only person who will tell you a George H.W. Bush story today. When President Bush was running against Ronald Reagan in 1980, he was so driven, so frenetic about shaking every possible hand he could that he once by mistake shook the hand of a department store mannequin in a New Hampshire department store. Lyndon Johnson would have tried to register that mannequin. And God only knows what Bill Clinton might have done. Come on. I'm at the be curious, be gracious, be hopeful. Let's have a little bit of fun here. Come on. Vote in those elections. Run for office, even if it's the school board or the city council. Don't complain about what's going on in the arena if you're not willing to get into the arena. Put your hand over your heart and join in when a band strikes up the national anthem. Take naps on summer afternoons. Subscribe to newspapers and magazines and buy hardback books, please. I have 3 children that I'm going to have to pay to someday sit in a room like this, so do what you can for me. Read detective novels. Savor Jane Austen, Anthony Trollope, and the SEC. Write thank you notes on real paper. The parents will like that. If you're so inclined, say your prayers. Try to look up from those screens, whether on your phone or on your wrist. Yes, technology contains multitudes, but virtual reality is just that. It's virtual, not real. And above all, remember in hours of joy and of darkness that a life well lived is judged not by the bottom line, but by the big picture. If you remember this, you're going to make history. And the rest of us can't wait to see what you do with your own hour upon the stage. It'll be fantastic. And the stories you write in your lives and in the life of the nation and of the world will be stories not of fear, but of hope, not of darkness, but of light. And there is, in the end, no more important story than that. Congratulations and Godspeed.